Hello and welcome to Health Styles. I'm Connie Mead. We'd all like to think that when times get tough, we will be there for our family and friends. And if we're the ones who are facing a major challenge, we hope that they will be there for us as well. But sometimes the support that we give another can actually be raised from an ordinary level to an extraordinary level. And this is the case for my guests today, who know firsthand how extraordinary support can be. So their story of compassion and hope offers lessons for all of us. Joining me today for our discussion is DePalma, who is a Chelmsford resident and a recent kidney transplant recipient, and Maura Snow, who is also a Chelmsford resident, who is the kidney donor. And also we have Laura Dempsey here from the New England Organ Bank, and Laura is the Events and Media Relations Coordinator there at the New England Organ Bank in Waltham. Okay, I want to thank you all for joining us and being here today.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Before we get started, I just want to mention one thing that I asked somebody from the Leahy Clinic transplant team to be here as well, but she wasn't able to be here. And I think that they're, we'll probably be mentioning Leahy Clinic, so I just wanted to mention that, we did invite them, and unfortunately our schedules didn't allow it, but we're not really speaking on their behalf, but we'll be talking about your experiences there. So as we get started, I'd like to start first with Laura, I think, who can maybe give us a sense of what the situation is with people who need transplants and the organs that are available.
Well, currently, the most shocking number is that there's approximately 114,000 people in the United States that are currently waiting for a life-saving transplant. Around 98,000 of those are actually waiting for a kidney transplant. And so there's just simply not enough organs to save everyone. And unfortunately, about 18 people will die every day waiting for a life-saving transplant. And so one of our jobs at the New England Organ Bank is to raise awareness, to educate medical communities, and educate our communities and the public about organ donation, why it's so important, and then simply how to register to be an organ and tissue donor.
Okay, and how do you register to be an organ donor?
There are several ways. The most common way is to visit your motor vehicle office, either when you are getting your driver's license or renewing your registration. And then when you have the paperwork, here in Massachusetts, it's just simply written on your paperwork and you can check, yes, I choose to be an organ and tissue donor. You can also, here in Massachusetts, you can also go on to the RMV website and you can visit www.donatelifenewengland.org, and it just takes a few minutes and you can sign up right there.
Okay, all right. Now, I understand just this morning I was reading something about Facebook getting involved in organ donation. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it was just a very exciting announcement yesterday morning that Facebook has launched this initiative where you can now add to your Facebook timeline that you're an registered to be an organ donor. You can put that right on your Facebook timeline, and then if you're not currently registered to be a donor, then you can, it gives you points right to the website so that you can go ahead and register. Since this was launched yesterday at 8 o'clock this morning, we've had over 1,000 individuals register to be a donor. On a general full day, we'll have somewhere between 40 and 50 people register. And so obviously this has had a very significant impact. And that number is just here in New England. Okay, we haven't received numbers from across the country. So obviously this is a very, very substantial impact, and it will, at the end of the day, save lives.
Right, right. So it just raises the awareness, and in a way,
yes,
maybe it even puts a little pressure on people. I don't want to say peer pressure, but in a way it kind of gets people thinking.
It gets people thinking.
And so they go ahead and make that move right then and there.
Exactly. That's what's really special about this particular the way that Facebook did it is that it not only raises awareness and shows people, oh look, so-and-so is an organ donor, but it also gives them, points them right in the direction to go ahead and register if they're not currently registered. And people, especially through things like Facebook and other social media sites, they like to get behind a cause, they like to join a movement. And I think that that's something that is going to really increase our numbers in regards to the number of people that are registered, and decrease the time that people have to wait, and decrease the number of people that are waiting.
Right, right, and save some of those lives, those people who are dying every day. Okay, well, we're going to shift gears a little bit here. We're going to talk to two people who have had first-hand experience with this, and in this case, we're going to be talking about a live donation as opposed to something that happens when someone passes away. This is another kind of donation, organ donation that can happen, and we have two Chelmsford residents who have some first-hand knowledge of this. Why don't we start with Don? And if I understand you were ill, and you know it was determined that you would need or could use, shall we say, a kidney transplant. Is that correct?
Right.
And so were you having dialysis at that point?
Right. When they diagnosed me as needing dialysis, they also put me in touch with the Leahy Clinic, which did an assessment of whether I would be a good candidate for a transplant.
I see.
And we went through a whole raft of medical and psychological and other kinds of assessment in order to determine the likelihood or the benefit of that transplant, and they indeed decided that I would be a good transplant candidate. Nonetheless, it took about a year before we got around to being able to do that.
Okay, I was going to ask how long the process took. And when I was doing my research, I was surprised in a way that you sort of almost had, it sounded to me like you almost had to qualify to be accepted into this program. As you say, they did a lot of screening or looking at your situation individually. They
want to make sure that the individual is healthy enough to undergo what's really major surgery. Right. So if they look at the body as a whole, all of the systems have to be at a good level of health before they'll actually cut you open and put in a new kidney. Right,
and they want to make sure that then it's going to be successful. So they want to put it in someone who's going to have good prognosis too, probably.
And I think at Leahy the number's around 96% success rate after the first year, which I think is testament to the fact that they're doing things correctly.
Right, right. And so how long ago, can I ask?
This was January 4th
of
this year.
Okay, so you're still in your first year of having this. Okay, and so let me just ask, before you had the transplant, did it impact your life in a great way to have this illness that you were dealing with?
Substantially. I travel a lot for business, so the year that I was on dialysis was a very tough one in terms of scheduling my life the way that I'm accustomed to living it. So what I was doing was going every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening to sit in a chair for 3 hours hooked up to a machine that was doing what one's kidneys do 24 hours a day. Right. And so that meant that whenever I traveled, if I traveled, I would have to arrange literally weeks in advance to have dialysis performed wherever I happened to be. So I did this a few times in California, in Utah, in Florida, and actually in Portugal as well.
Okay, and that must be pretty intensive, I would think, or it's like another snafu, another thing you have to go through whenever you're traveling, and it's kind of complicated, I guess is what I'm getting at.
It does. Weeks before you're dealing with the issue to make sure that there's a chair for you where you can go and that it fits in with your schedule.
Right.
And then in the case of, say, the Portugal visit, I was giving a keynote presentation and I had to build that presentation along with lots of meetings with clients and other people in the industry that I deal with during the day, and then in the evening, rather than go off to, say, the social event, I went off to have my blood cleansed.
Right.
So it was a long day and very difficult in general to deal with. But the alternative to dialysis is not very good.
Right, right. So you do it. Yeah. Right. So, okay. So then at some point you are accepted into the transplant program and you're put on a waiting list, I'm assuming? Or is that
we went on the UNOS, I went on the UNOS list and was told that depending on various factors, it was probably in the range of 3 to 5 years to have a kidney from someone who was deceased. But thankfully I didn't have to wait that long because I had some friends, and one in particular who came forward and offered a kidney.
Okay. So was this, did you launch a campaign to find somebody, or people were just got around that you were looking for someone and
Actually, I don't
popped up?
One day, my wife mentioned that a couple of friends had come forward.
I see.
And she didn't mention who they were.
Okay.
And then one day she slipped, and she did mention, because Maura can talk to this question, but there were still the flip side of me being assessed for being a good transplant candidate was whether Maura would be a good person to give the kidney.
Right. So let's talk about that a bit. First of all, so you heard that he needed a kidney.
Yeah.
And so you said, well, I'll do that, or I'll offer, or what?
You know, I knew Donald had been ill for a while. When he started dialysis, then I knew he needed a kidney. And back of my mind was, I could probably give him a kidney. I mean, I think I started thinking that in January of 2011, a year before the surgery, but it was in the back of my mind as, I think I should give Donald a kidney. Sometimes a thought occurs to you. It's kind of, the world I want to live in. When something bad happens, you step up to the plate. But Donald wasn't actively seeking a kidney necessarily. And another friend was thinking the same sort of thing. And so Donald's wife, Karen, mentioned that the other friend was going in to be tested to see about being a donor. And I thought, well, I should be tested too. And so I asked Karen, his wife, I said, well, I'd like to do that testing. And so I said, who do I contact at Leahy? And so she put me in touch with Denise Morin, who is the donor advocate at Leahy Clinic. So Denise begins with a telephone screen. It takes about an hour, asks some, questions about health, history, family support, that sort of thing. And then once that screen is finished, if Denise has all the answers she needs, then the screening process begins. So I got through all of that okay. The screening began, but it was a little frustrating because the other friend who had stepped up to be tested now had to wait because they wanted to test us both at the same time, because it just works better if you test multiple people at the same time. And so I actually slowed down the process by getting into the process.
I see.
But ultimately in the course of the testing, the other friend learned that she actually only had one really well-functioning kidney herself. The other one was working but not as hard as it could, so she couldn't donate. So
it was a good thing you had stepped
It was a good thing I had stepped up and slowed it down.
Right.
But
so let me back up there a minute, because you mentioned, you go through this screening process and she asked you all these questions, and one of them is about your family. So now, what was your family's reaction to this, if I wouldn't be so nosy?
Yeah, well, they were worried. My husband was. I have a husband and 4 grown sons, and one of the grown sons lives at home, and my mother lives in an attached apartment. So there's a lot of family right there. So the main question is after you have the surgery, who's going to take care of you? And I said, well, I do live with a husband, a grown son, and a mom who can do it in shifts, and many neighborhood people are volunteering as well, but I don't know what level of support I'm going to need. So that was their question. I had fielded it with them earlier. Like I'd mentioned to each son separately when I happened to speak to them. I'm like, you guys know Don, right? Yeah. I said, well, he's on dialysis, and I'm thinking at some point I might think about giving him a kidney. What do you think? And they just said, Mom, that is awesome. Wow, I can't believe you would do that. And I said, well, I would. And my mother's reaction was, well, what if someone in the family needs a kidney?
That would be something I would think of too.
And I said, well, you know what? I have 4 sons.
Right.
We all have similar blood types, so I'm sure if someone else needs one, there's someone else who could step up. But yeah, I think my husband was most worried because he doesn't want to see me in pain or uncomfortable. He absolutely understood why I wanted to do it. He also said that he would be willing to step forward and do it. At this point, I was already in the process, and we knew that one of the questions in the initial screening was around blood pressure, and he's had some issues there, so we thought he probably wasn't the best candidate anyhow. But
well, actually, I remember when we went to visit you guys up in New Hampshire at your summer vacation up in Loch Lyme, is that where it is?
Yes, Loch Lyme Lodge. Can I give it a plug?
Yes, okay.
And Doug and I, Maura's husband and I, took the canoe out across the lake, and the wind was really blowing. And at one point, we're getting pulled into this current. We just put down the paddles and let the wind take us. And he said, you know, if it doesn't work out with Maura's kidney, you can have one of mine. Just
Okay.
And I felt at that point there was certainly family support across the board there. So.
Right.